Yo, 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 it's your man MAS, back with more Dandadan, right? The series is blowing up, right? It was only a matter of time before it topped the charts. I've seen a couple of analytics, and there was a time that Dandadan was like, it was getting up there, but it wasn't like in the #1 spot. My friend, right now, as we are recording, Dandadan has been #1 for a minute now, like legitimately, like no debate, and rightfully so. The show is just that damn good, all right? But that you seen the title of the video. We talking about the biggest what if with Dandadan currently, all right? And for me, essentially, that means is Dandadan one of the next biggest animes? And when I say next biggest animes, it's not like they're reinventing the wheel, right? Even though their story is pretty unique, the issue is there's been so many great animes in the past that people are like, hey, this is like the next reincarnation of that, or this is the next reincarnation of this. When are we gonna get the next Cowboy Bebop? When are we gonna get the next Fullmetal Alchemist? When are we gonna get the next Berserk, right? The biggest what ifs in anime. And maybe this is like the best way I could explain it, all right? If you're honest with yourself, Vinland Saga, in my opinion, was a what if of, like, for me, season 1. Vinland Saga season 1 was so good. I was like, yo, this has to be the next Berserk. It has to be. Like the grittiness, the gore, the action. I was like, my friend, this is like the closest thing to like the next reincarnation of Berserk that you're ever going to get. I don't think anybody's even come close, right? But Vinland Saga is not Berserk, and it failed the what if test, right? Because Vinland Saga season 2, aka Farmland Saga, it just dropped the ball. I don't think they're at fault though, because it's his own story. Vinland Saga deserves to be its own story, right? So season 2 was meant to be slower, you know, and Thorfinn doesn't want to kill anybody. But it's not Berserk, all right? Guts ain't on that, right? So that was a huge, I won't say huge letdown, but it's like, all right, like Vinland Saga is still good in its own right, but it's not the next Berserk. The way Dandadan is going, at least based upon the story plots, and I will say this, right? Up until episode 7, it's really good, but 7 is when it kind of hits that emotional peak, right? Like it kind of draws on the heartstrings. I'm like, yo, this show has like, well, I don't know what, rhythm, passion. I'm like, oh snap, like they told a sob story that was really good. Episode 7 is when, in my opinion, the show is already doing really good just in terms of the production, the action, the dialogue, the edginess, like even like the topics in terms of like bananas, I want to get your banana back, like it's all unconventional. So Dandadan is so far unique compared to so many animes out there already. But episode 7 kind of peaks it, and that's where we're going to the biggest what if, right? So my theory, my personal theory, because you know we don't read over here, right? So if there is a manga, I ain't read it. This is off the dome. My guy, this is off the dome. Like no, I'll say future information or anything like that. I think Dandadan, the biggest what if is that it could possibly be the next Yu Yu Hakusho, all right? And everybody knows, everybody loves Yu Yu Hakusho. Yu Yu Hakusho is a cult classic. It, to me, is the definition of the best tournament arc ever, right? And you can't include Dragon Ball Z because they have tournament arcs like every other season, right? Yu Yu Hakusho was just that damn good, and the way the story progressed in Yu Yu Hakusho is the same way Dandadan is progressing, right? But Dandadan has so many elements that are different, or I'll say so many elements that are comparable to other anime. So it has the Fooly Cooly feel, but yeah, it kind of has the storytelling of a Yu Yu Hakusho, but it has the edginess of like one of those itchy shows, right? Like one of the, you know, bananas and being naked. Like it has so many elements that it's hard to just kind of put it into one ball, right? But if I had to say the closest in terms of like, hey, this is like the next reincarnation of, it has to be Yu Yu Hakusho. It's the same pacing, where it's like Yusuke died, right? Of course, he didn't die, but like the main character has a problem. Some abnormal thing happens to him, right? He now finds out he has these weird powers, and then he eventually encounters people, classmates, other individuals who possibly had powers too, all right? And then here's the thing too, Yu Yu Hakusho didn't really have a purpose. That's how it kind of feels with Dandadan at first, right? It's just kind of like my man's trying to get his balls back. That's like the gist of it, right? But it kind of hinted at it towards like the last episode. I'm not sure if that's episode 10. It might be episode 10, where it's like, all right, maybe the purpose is the aliens are trying to invade, but they can't invade the Earth because of the yokai. And they're trying to harness power so that they can combat the yokai so they can invade the Earth. That's the closest to an actual like purpose I've seen with the show, right? Minus him getting his balls back and, you know, his man back, right? So I'm like, okay, like the thing about it is the show was so good, it didn't even really need to have a purpose. Right now, the only thing that's really lacking with the show, which will probably eventually happen, is they need some kind of central evil figure. Right now, they do not have any central evil figure, right? Which will probably happen, and then some shows don't need it, you know, but I think Yu Yu Hakusho, it was the same way with Yu Yu Hakusho, meaning like as the seasons progressed, they didn't really have central figures. They had like main missions where you had, and then the main missions had like a specific target, but Yu Yu Hakusho eventually had the mega villain. Maybe that's the best word, like the villain, right? Dandadan doesn't have that yet. You can tell it's on pacing to have that. Because you gotta think about it, as you're watching Dandadan, it makes no sense that he has these powers and there's these yokai and aliens and these abilities. You can see the main, like the central characters and their abilities. It makes no sense for them to have these abilities with nothing to use it against. You get me? So like there is probably going to be, I'll say like an agency, a group, a super villain. There probably will be, because it makes no sense to really, you could tell in the show they really emphasize these powers, but ain't really nobody to really use it on, minus like it's random aliens, random yokai. So you could tell, I don't think it takes a rocket science to tell like there will be a central figure or central group moving forward in the show. But I am telling you, the biggest what if right now to me is that Dandadan is eventually going to be, or could be, the next Yu Yu Hakusho, and that's saying a big deal, because I don't think there's been any anime that's been able to fill any void for the older stuff in a while. Honestly, like in a while. I mean, minus the big three, because then My Hero came and kind of filled that void of like a Naruto, Bleach kind of shonen feel. So, but I'm talking about like the really classics, the Yu Yu Hakushos, the Rurouni Kenshins, the Berserks, the shows, the Fullmetal Alchemist, the shows that were so good that people were like, hey, I'm not gonna lie to you, if you came out with something that's similar, we would die happy, right? Like those shows are just that damn good, and there's been nothing that's been able to recreate it since. The next Cowboy Bebop, there's been nothing, all right? And then here's the argument that I feel like a lot of people make, but I don't think it equates, right? They kind of compared Jujutsu Kaisen to the next Yu Yu Hakusho. I've seen that conversation before. I'm telling you it's not. Jujutsu Kaisen is his own thing, but I just don't think Jujutsu Kaisen story-wise is like that great. I don't think it's bad, but I don't think it's definitely not Dandadan level. And the difference between like Jujutsu Kaisen and Dandadan in comparison to Yu Yu Hakusho was that Jujutsu Kaisen, everybody just kind of had powers off rip, right? So minus the main character, they introduced the school, and the school with the cursed energy and the people, like everything was already mapped out, like from episode 1. And they spent a lot of, like, that show was annoying. They spent a lot of season 1 of Jujutsu Kaisen explaining like the power system. Like that's not what Yu Yu Hakusho did. Yu Yu Hakusho eventually explained the power system, but they did that like in season 2, season 3. Like they kind of just let the story go. And I'm telling you, that is what Dandadan is doing, right? The same pace. Like you could tell as you're watching it too, I'm like, there's no purpose, but like they don't really explain anything, but like they kind of ease into it while they're telling it, like they're telling a story, and they're eventually going to get to the point where they explain the power system and these abilities and certain characters that show up that are then learning their abilities, right? Like there's a lot more explanation to it, which was the same thing with Yu Yu Hakusho. It was like he learned about the spirit gun, but then the other characters kind of came and then they kind of learned their abilities as well as they were progressing through their journey, right? Jujutsu Kaisen wasn't that. It was kind of just like off rip, and I feel like that takes away a lot from the Yu Yu Hakusho essence, right? Because everything was just kind of out on Front Street. But with Jujutsu Kaisen, but Yu Yu Hakusho is going, I'm telling you, it's going the same pace as Dandadan. So if the biggest what if can happen, I will be so happy if it does fill that void, because I don't know, like those shows just meant so much to me. Like again, the Yu Yu Hakusho, the Fullmetal Alchemist, I'm like, yo, like for me, I feel like a lot of you feel that way. It's like, yo, if I could get, I would kill for an anime that like is similar but different, has its own unique story, which Dandadan has its own unique story. Nobody's saying you have to like copyright off rip, right? But still have your own unique story, but having those elements of a Yu Yu Hakusho-esque story or a Cowboy Bebop-esque story or a Berserk-esque story. And I feel like that was Vinland Saga at first. Season 1, it was still its own unique story, but it really did have that Berserk feel, like the guts, the violence, the skills. Like it had the Berserk feel. That was the closest thing. I think I've even said saw a Reddit trend talking about the same thing. Like, yo, if you want like comparisons, watch this. So the biggest what if right now is Dandadan is going to be the next Yu Yu Hakusho, or maybe something even better. All right, but I'm telling you, for me, it's on course. It's on par to be that. All right. But only time will tell. There's a lot of great animes that were like that. Meaning, for me, the biggest animes that I've seen that stood out to me: Frieren, Vinland Saga, Dandadan, Solo Leveling, and then Hell's Paradise. For me, in my personal opinion, Hell's Paradise is still probably the most unique. Solo Leveling is probably the most engaging of all of them. Dandadan is the most different, like in terms of like it kind of checks all the boxes. So I can see why it's kind of dominating so much. And I feel like out of all of them, I could be wrong, all right? But I feel like out of all of them, Dandadan could probably last the test of time, right? Frieren is great. I just don't think Frieren is gonna last the test of time if they don't put out enough content. Hell's Paradise, I think Hell's Paradise is amazing. I just don't think like they're advertised. I don't think there's enough push for like mainstream, right? But out of all of them, I personally like Hell's Paradise the best. I think Dandadan kind of has all the elements. And then Solo Leveling too, but the thing about Solo Leveling that's unfortunate is that it's definitely more like like it has more of just a shonen recipe versus the other ones are still kind of unique in their own right, not just straight up kind of shonen-esque. But Solo Leveling, it kind of has that element, just the main character leveling up and powering up, that kind of thing. But that's my take. Definitely comment below, tell me what you think. If you like the content, please like, comment, subscribe. And again, got my own comic series as well, just not me ranting. Definitely check me out, all right? But it's your man, MAS, My Annoying Senpai. I'm out.